Sometimes it'll pop up on the screen while I'm looking at something. I'll say, that's a very funny looking number. If this is true, it's a shocking thing, but it may also be basically an accounting error.
Yeah.
So let's go and find out.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Dasugan. With primaries from California to New Jersey tonight, what is Steve Kornacki's go-to election indicator? We're going to have a behind-the-scenes look with our chief data analyst today in our Extra Scoop. Plus, President Trump is tapping a man with no known intelligence background, but a lot of real estate experience to be acting director of national intelligence. So the question is, why Bill Pulte? But first, so it's been a while since we talked about the war in Ukraine on this podcast. And that is because there have been a slew of other conflicts happening overseas. But the war there is anything but over, and Russia made that clear this morning. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians poured into the Kyiv subway system as Russia bombed Ukraine's capital. Moscow also struck the southeastern city of Dnipro. Ukrainian officials there said the attacks killed more than 20 people and injured over 100. Now, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says his country needs more help from the United States to protect against future strikes from Russia. But how much is the Trump administration willing to give while its focus is on the war with Iran? For this, I want to bring in Illia Ponomarenko, a journalist and author based in Ukraine. Welcome, Illia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. So you are based in Bucha, which is near Kyiv, the capital. What is the situation there like on the ground right now?
Last night was yet another massive attack particularly on Kyiv, which left a lot of people dead and which left, as it often happens, the entire city in flames and smoke. But at the same time, in places like Bucha, which has the reputation of being the scene of a massacre from 2022, it was peaceful night. But at the same time, this peaceful night was perpetuated with the thunder, with the rolling thunder coming from Kyiv. It's about 20 to 25 miles away, and you could still, in the dead of night, you could still hear the roar of explosions, of blasts, of air battles, of jets trying to intercept missiles.
The attack, as you mentioned, coming from Russia early this morning, overnight, was on the capital city of Kyiv. Were residents there informed ahead of this attack?
Yes, a couple of nights before the attack that happened last night, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, he issued statements saying that we know from our intelligence that they are preparing yet another massive attack. So get ready, be prepared, stay in shelters, don't do heed to, sound of alarms, do monitor the situation from your mobile phones. We have special applications for, alarms. So
don't ignore the alarms,
yeah,
for instance.
Essentially, that's the slogan. Do not
heed the
ignore,
warnings.
Yeah, do not ignore warnings these days, these particular days in these cities.
This war has basically been in a stalemate for a while. Russia has targeted Ukrainian infrastructure. Ukraine has been attacking Russian oil fields. Now your president, Zelenskyy, is asking the U.S. for missiles for defense systems. Why is this assistance so critical right now?
It is extremely important because of ballistic missiles, because of Russian ballistic missiles that are not only for Ukraine, but generally around the world is one of the most difficult targets to intercept and one of the deadliest weapons that Russians have. If we talk seriously, the best and the essentially only instrument to intercept such targets with a very significant percentage of guarantee are the PAC-3 missile systems, Patriot, American-made. And the huge problem is that, there is a wild shortage of such missiles following the facilities in Iran area. And it's not only about Ukraine, but also around the world.
So let's talk about what's happening with Iran and how that's affected the continuing war between Russia and Ukraine, because there have been resources that are heavily devoted to the war with Iran right now when it comes to the United States and its military arsenal. How has that shift impacted the war in Ukraine? And is it allowing Russia to basically do what they want, to push forward in Ukraine because the focus of the world has turned now to the Middle East and off of what's going on between Russia and Ukraine?
I would say that, this shortage that we ended up having in terms of air defenses, missile interceptors, it allows Russia to be to act with even more impunity in terms of terror against civilians with massive missile strikes. So they have a very large window of opportunity to use specifically ballistic systems, knowing that Ukrainians are either severely limited in their capabilities of intercepting this, or do not have any capabilities at all right now.
What about the global advocacy on behalf of the Ukrainians when instead the attention is turned towards how to end the war with Iran and the United States? Do you feel as if, as a Ukrainian, that the advocacy on your behalf to help defend Ukraine against Russia has fallen off because everybody is watching what's happening in Iran?
I think this is what happened in many ways, but I would say that the negative effects of yet another war drawing a lot of attention, drawing a lot of resources to itself. In many ways, this negative effect, is mitigated in a very vivid growth of Ukrainian independence in terms of providing weapons, producing weapons. So it has been the case for the last couple of years, at least a couple of years, that Ukraine is producing most of its weapons for itself, by itself, or using European manufacturers or European money and develop Ukrainian capabilities to produce this. A lot of people were fearing the situation in which the United States withdraws all the support that we had. Number one, Baker withdraws from supporting Ukraine, and a lot of people were really worried about this. And this was seen as something that could precipitate the Ukrainian fall, losing such an insanely important partner and backer. But thanks to a lot of efforts, particularly by the civil society that were pushing, for more independence, for more weapons,
self-sufficiency.
Self-sufficiency. Because of this, a lot of potential problems are mitigated right now. If we were still that dependent on, for instance, U.S. supplies as we were in 2023, for instance. But war was pretty different from what we have now. So we can go on, and it brings us to the same question that, do not rush to bury Ukraine. Ukrainians will always find a way to go or mitigate at least the harshest problems, just for the sake of survival.
Illia, thank you.
Thank you.
President Trump has just tapped Bill Pulte to be the new acting director of national intelligence to replace outgoing director Tulsi Gabbard at the end of June. Now, Pulte is currently the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and in that role, he has targeted perceived enemies of President Trump. He is also the chairman of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and a close Trump ally. Pulte has no known background in intelligence, military, or national security. So what qualifies him to serve as the director of national intelligence? Or does loyalty trump all, pun intended? For this, I want to bring in Dan Luce, NBC News national security and global affairs reporter. Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Let's talk about Bill Pulte, right? He has made his career in real estate. He is not in the intelligence community, as I just said. But now the president wants him to be acting director of national intelligence. Why him? Give us a background on Bill Pulte.
Well, I think a good parallel, one way of thinking about this is look who's basically handling every major diplomatic effort right now. His name is Steve Witkoff. He had absolutely no diplomatic experience whatsoever, or really political experience. And he's trying to end the war in Iran, the war in Ukraine. He was negotiating the ceasefire for Gaza, and he worked in real estate, and he was on very good terms with the president. So as far as Pulte is concerned, he seems to have won Trump's confidence because he took a fairly, I would say, tame kind of government job handling federal housing and turning it into a pretty intense partisan political weapon, alleging various cases of mortgage fraud, going over people's paperwork, perceived political enemies, Democrats, and concluding that somehow they made a mistake on their mortgage paperwork. And so he's gone after a whole number of people, Congress members, including Adam Schiff and others. And so now, with an opening, this is the highest ranking intelligence position in the U.S. government. And arguably, the U.S. has perhaps the most powerful intelligence apparatus in the world, probably the biggest budgets of any country. That includes not only the CIA, it's 18 agencies. And this person who has never, not just never worked in intelligence, he really hasn't had national security experience, right? He did not serve in Congress on the Intelligence Committee or the Armed Services Committee. He didn't serve in the military like Tulsi Gabbard. So this is unprecedented. And one more thing to add, by law, because this position was created after the September 11th attacks, as you know, by law, Congress said that this person who fills this job has to have extensive experience in national security. It's pretty hard to make that case unless there's some secret CIA mission he was on that we haven't heard about.
I want to talk first about what he did in federal housing and finance, because you alluded to it, just to give folks some more detail on that. He sent criminal referrals to the Justice Department against New York Attorney General Letitia James and Senator Adam Schiff, both Democrats, both, by the way, denying the allegations. He was also, I'm talking about Bill Pulte here, the driver behind the controversy around the Federal Reserve headquarters renovation, which Trump has called a quote unquote lousy job. So what could he do in this position? Like, what is the thinking in putting him here as acting DNI?
That's a good question. I think one way to answer that is to see how did Tulsi Gabbard handle this job. And so she broke with tradition. And usually the people who have held this job have stayed away from anything really deeply politically partisan. Intelligence directors try to stay above the fray. But Tulsi Gabbard took a much different view. And so she was going after people who she said had misused the intelligence agencies, had, in her words, weaponized the intelligence agencies against Donald Trump, against their political enemies. So she was claiming that President Obama and President Biden somehow misused and abused the intelligence services. And she made some really drastic accusations. Nothing really has come of that. It was a lot of rhetoric. So given what he's done at the Federal Housing Agency, which you just cited, I think, obviously then you have to wonder, will he apply the same formula? Nevertheless, this is someone without experience who's going to be an acting director who will have a huge learning curve.
What's been the reaction from lawmakers, both Democrats and Republicans? Because you mentioned this earlier. He has to be confirmed. And amidst that confirmation, it is written, as this position was created after 9/11, that anybody who takes on a position like this needs to have a substantial amount of experience in order to take on the position of DNI. So does he have an uphill battle in getting confirmed?
Keep in mind that at the moment, the president hasn't nominated him to be, as the permanent director. So they haven't submitted the nomination to Congress. He's just this acting director. Right. Gabbard was confirmed, and I think a lot of Republicans were not enthusiastic at the time and became even less enthusiastic once she was in office. So there won't be a lot of tears shed by a lot of Republicans, especially in the Senate. They question whether she was the right person for that job. Democrats have spoken up really quickly, not surprisingly, and said this person has no experience. He's just being appointed because he's politically loyal. So it's not going over well. I think a confirmation process could be could be a heavy lift. Given the state of relations right now with Republicans in the Senate, you now have some pushback over this whole weaponization fund that Trump proposed. He's basically backed off of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think even Senate Majority Leader Thune has said it's going to be an uphill battle if, in fact, the president picks Pulte for the permanent job.
This is not going to be a pick that Republicans will applaud, absolutely. But it also creates, Yasmin, yet more kind of volatility and instability and uncertainty in the intelligence world.
Right.
Because the federal government and the intelligence community agencies as well have had tremendous turmoil. And I think the danger is you have this kind of uncertainty and a bit of instability bureaucratically. And it could mean that somebody drops the ball.
Dan Luce, as always, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we are going to leave you with this new segment that we are calling The Extra Scoop. It is where we take you behind the scenes to give some of the flavor inside the stories that are driving the day. Today is a major primary day from New Jersey to Iowa, all the way to California, which means Steve Kornacki, NBC News chief data analyst, is staying up very late to watch it all and bring it to us. Steve, are you ready to play this game?
I don't know what I'm getting myself into, but let's try.
All right. The categories are the dish,
Okay.
cherry on top, and cone of silence. The dish is juicy details.
Oh.
Cherry on top is getting your expert opinion, and cone of silence is let's get personal.
It seems the safe choice here would be the cherry.
Cherry on top. Okay. Say that I am a political junkie who is trying to get smarter about this election season. What is the number one demographic or data point that I should be paying attention to be smart about the outcome of tonight and of the midterms overall looking towards November?
Independent voters. I say it because we just assume now almost in midterm elections that it's going to be bad for the White House party, right?
Yeah.
And you look at Trump's poll numbers, not good. You look at it, sort of the generic ballot for Republicans, not good. But the one exception here was 2022, Joe Biden's first midterm. Biden had bad poll numbers. The generic ballot had not been great for his party, and the expectation was Democrats were going to get clobbered. They ended up basically drawing even with independent voters. Democrats, there's sort of a lot of arguments about what they were able to do, but they seemed to nationalize it in 2022. They seemed to make it a bit about January 6th. They seem to have success doing that with independent voters. So can Republicans do something here in 2026 that would change the way independent voters treat this midterm? When you just look at it with Trump's approval rating, you say it's going to be a bloodbath for Trump and for the Republicans. Democrats managed to avoid that in 2022 when Biden had bad numbers. Can Republicans find a way with independent voters this time?
Okay, here is a question on behalf of all aspiring chief data analysts.
Okay.
How do you get your start? Like, what do you do? How do you prepare? Like, how do you become a chief data analyst?
It's an accumulation.
You have so much information in your brain
about very few things, and everything else I'm a complete moron about. Truly, people who know me are astounded by how little I know about anything else. Every election I kind of internalize. A state, and we add another election. Now I know another layer of data for that state. And now after, a dozen years of doing this, or really, 20 years of watching it on my own, I've got a lot of layers of data kind of cataloged in my head for each state, for different counties, for different districts. It's endlessly fascinating to me.
You know what I think is one of your best skills, aside from having all of your information in your brain, having all of this information in your brain, is being able to be super transparent about what you don't know.
Look, I think you have to look at it on an election night as a journey that you're taking with the viewer. The viewer wants to know what you want to know. Who's going to win this and how is it looking? How is it shaping up right now?
Yeah.
And one of the realities of watching returns come in on election night is sometimes a new return will come in, and instead of answering a question, it'll raise a question. That's on top of just there are sometimes going to be glitches. There are going to be, glitches in how the vote is reported into us. That's something that happens in real time. Sometimes it'll pop up on the screen while I'm looking at something. I'll say, that's a very funny looking number. If this is true, it's a shocking thing, but it may also be basically an accounting error.
Yeah.
So let's go and find out. And so I think if you go into it sort of presuming that you can you can have a very sort of airtight answer to everything that happens along the way. You'll be humbled very quickly. So,
Steve Kornacki, you got a long day ahead. Thank you.
thanks, yes.
All right. That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.